Okay, I'll start the proceedings. First of all, welcome. Thanks for coming. Another year has gone by. They seem to go by extremely fast since the last one of these. This year, Chris Clark, who is the ex-CMO of HSBC, suggested the title for the event, which is Understanding the Value of Brands in a Digital Age. Clearly, that's one of those things that's right at the top of the agenda for banks. The threat to business systems and communication channels is very significant in such a big industry. So we're grateful to him for a great title. We've also got a great speaker lineup, and I'll draw your attention to the program. Our convention is normally not to go into a great deal of detail introducing the speakers. You can get all the CV details from the CVs in the brochure. So all speakers, please forgive me for not giving you lavish introductions. We find that it stops us actually sticking to time, which is nearly always a problem at Brand Finance anyway, because we get so carried away talking about everything, particularly me. So I'm trying very hard to stick to my time today. So please look at this. It shows you the program. It shows you all the speakers. The first session, we're privileged to have the Minister, Matt Hancock, said when he was a junior minister that he would speak, and I'm very pleased that now he's Secretary of State, he's agreed to fulfill that. And we have half an hour of his time, and he is prepared to take questions. So he's going to direct his own questions when it comes round to that. So if you've got any, please speak up. We then have Paddy Barwise, who's a professor at London Business School, who we've known virtually for the whole life of Brand Finance, who introduced us to clients and has always been an interesting sparring partner with not exactly the same views as us about brand valuation, but I'm sure he'll tell you more about that himself. And then we have Martin Herring of Finastra, coming back to the banking theme. The fact is, banks are by far the biggest capitalized group on stock markets worldwide. They are the biggest group of brands in our tables. We publish 500 in the Banker magazine every year. Brian Kaplan, the editor of the Banker, was there last night. And basically, the ups and downs of banking brands it has been quite a roller coaster. So that's the first session before the coffee. I will just give you a brief introduction, starting with the headline standout thing of our tables this year is all top 5 slots are taken by digital brands. In the past, we have had retailers, banks, or other heavy old industry brands in there. Nowadays, it's dominated by the digital brands. Here are the actual results. They were released at midnight. They're already beginning to go around the world. The story about Amazon has been picked up quite extensively. Interestingly, Jeff Bezos is reputed to have said that brands are more important online than they are in the offline world, which I found rather amusing because 2 years ago I was an expert witness in a case for the IRS in Seattle. They were trying to persuade the judge that the Amazon brand was worth a lot, because if they did, they would receive more tax, whereas the Amazon team were trying to argue the exact reverse, that their brand was not really worth a great deal, and that it might just as well be called the Nile or the Limpopo. It would work just as well. Interestingly enough, I went and researched this, and I discovered that when Jeff Bezos actually set up Amazon, the first brand he was going to use, does anyone know? Quiz. Does anyone know? No? Cadabra. He was going to call it cadabra.com. And then a brand consultant, I think, pointed out to him it sounded rather like cadaver. And so maybe it wasn't a great idea. So he put that one to one side. He then was going to call it relentless.com. And someone said, oh, that's a bit tedious, isn't it? And they can't pronounce that in China. So eventually they came up with Amazon. And to my mind, it is a fantastic brand, which has worked fantastically well. And as you see, we think it's worth $150 billion to an organization that is nearly worth $1 trillion in itself. I won't linger on this, but the fact of the matter is Walmart, back at the height of the financial crisis, we actually had at number 1. That's a perfect example of where, bricks and mortar businesses back then were very important. and they've been overtaken. It's now dropped right down to 9th, even though it's by far the biggest retailer in the world. And the ICBC, the Chinese bank, has supplanted all foreign banks, Western banks, to get into our table, and wins not only the largest brand valuation, but also the strongest bank brand, which is quite an eye-opener. And it's the harbinger for a whole load of other Chinese brands that are coming into our tables. You can see here that this is the upward graph of the top 5. Apple took a wobble. It rebounded this year, and our numbers largely reflect what markets are saying about their future prospects. This time last year, when we were doing the analysis for the league tables, they were in a poor position and it dropped. This year it went back up again. Right now, we did the work just before Christmas. Right now, it seems to be going back down again. So they're on a bit of a roller coaster. And it could well be that they're on a terminal decline over the next few years. Meanwhile, Amazon just goes from strength to strength. They're saying it's going to get into medical healthcare provision, banking, all sorts of different retail they're not in. And interestingly, they are now moving back into the bricks and mortar space, but to fulfill their primary objective, which is online. So as I said, Chinese brands are entering our tables in significant numbers. It's interesting that in 2008 there were only 14 brands from China in our top 500. This year there are 65. The increase in the brand value of Chinese brands is $1 trillion. Happily for us, someone pointed out last night that from 2008, a lucky number, to 2018, another lucky number, the increase in the value of Chinese brands in our table has risen 888%, which is a particularly good one for a press release in China. So we're going to be pressing that home to our advantage shortly. As you probably know, this chap has decided he's fed up with them just being a manufacturing country. He wants China to own its own brands and to become a global leader in branding, and they are doing everything necessary to do that. Interestingly, since the 19th Party Congress in the autumn, they have taken a slight shift in policy. Whereas they were saying they wanted to acquire foreign brands, and they've acquired a lot, the emphasis now is on developing their own Chinese brands for world markets. So watch this space. We also measure the brand strength. These go up and down a bit. Ferrari was the number 1. Sadly, it's not doing quite so well at Formula One and isn't quite as strong. We measure them relative to their own sectors. So you measure against all your competitors in a sector out of 100, see how well you do, and then we compare it with the brands in all other sectors. So if one sector is doing particularly well, or a brand in one sector is doing particularly well, it might surpass another. And Ferrari has, sadly for them, dropped now to 3rd. Disney is a truly awesome brand which seems to go from strength to strength. And just before I finish and hand over to the Minister, I just wanted to say something. This is about understanding value. One of the big questions is the question of what these things are worth, these digital brands. What are they really worth? And it's all quite reminiscent of the dot-com era. I remember in 1999, I occasionally used to get invited to presentations about dot-com companies. And it was bizarre. People would talk about, oh, it's a whole new paradigm. Stop talking about profits, cash flows, revenues, David. That's not relevant. It's all about eyeballs, you know. And I just wanted to, this is going very slowly, remind you of a couple of those old brands back there in the dot-com era that were once considered to be very big, but have now completely disappeared. Here we have a few on the right-hand side that are now supposed to be very big and have very significant values, but several of them are struggling to monetize the fame. I won't go into detail, but the question is, it's all very well having a high profile and talking a lot. The other one is actually making money out of it. The 5 that are at the top of our list have worked out how to do it. They have really leveraged digital to make money. And I thought I would just put in a couple of examples. Tesla, you can see there the grey bars are the losses that they have been making. Apart from one little tiny quarter in 2013, they've never made a profit. They seem to me to be back in the era of the dot-com boom when profit was a dirty word. their share price keeps rising, but largely because they have convinced people that they're going to make loads of money in the future, and our brand value has risen because we follow what people say in the markets. The truth is, will they ever make it? I am extremely skeptical myself, although it's a great technological area. The Chinese car manufacturers, the major Western car manufacturers, I can't imagine they're going to sit quietly by while Tesla demolishes them. It's not going to happen in my view. But if you compare that with Amazon, yes, they had periods where they weren't making money, and Jeff Bezos famously apologized for making a profit on one occasion, because he said, we're not trying to make profits, we're trying to reinvest it to build a franchise, which he's done very successfully. But now they are making very healthy profits and forecasting even more healthy profits. They're kind of taking over the world. So the difference between hot air and reality, and spotting which one is which, is a tricky one, and that's the sort of thing we do at Brand Finance, and try and help people to get the monetization working. But I won't spend too much time plugging us. The last slide I've got here is just to demonstrate. From our tables over the period since 2007, we analyzed them, and what we found was that companies that had a brand worth more than 30% of their enterprise value at the date we valued them, and we measured throughout the whole period, in the States, outperformed the S&P quite substantially by a factor of 100%. So whereas the US firms with the brand value rating were nearly 100%, the overall index was 57. And we have used that insight to create investment indices both in Germany and in America. So I think the thing I'd like to say is, after 12 years of running these league tables and even longer of running our brand finance forums, I'm pleased to say that brand valuation is now right at the top of the agenda. People recognize not only brands, but the fact you can measure them and then manage them. And I think we are in for an interesting ride, particularly in China. China has totally accepted all these notions and is pursuing that agenda worldwide. So, as I was talking about politics in China, I suppose that's an appropriate segue to introduce our own politician. If I could ask Matt to come to the podium and please welcome the Minister. Thank you.